Hello and welcome. Today, we are going to unpack one of the most talked about letters in the entire investment world, the E and ESG. We're going to decode what that environmental factor really means for a business and trace how it travels all the way from the health of our planet to the health of your portfolio. So let's dive right in. And to really set the stage here, let's get one thing straight. This isn't just some abstract idea or corporate buzzword. Just listen to this warning from the IPCC. We're talking about the world's top climate scientists. The stakes are incredibly high. This is all about very real, very tangible consequences. And that urgency, well, that's exactly what's pushing the E right to the forefront of financial decision-making. So what are we actually talking about when we say the E in ESG? In this first part, we're going to break down what this pillar really stands for, both for the companies themselves and, of course, for the people who invest in them. The first thing you have to get your head around is just how broad the E really is. It's so much more than just carbon emissions. It covers everything: how a company manages its water and waste, what its impact on biodiversity is, you name it. And the crucial thing to remember is that these aren't fringe issues anymore, not at all. They are now seen as having a real, material, financial impact on a company's bottom line. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? For investors, for companies, you can't just wave a wand and say, fix the environment. It's way too big. You have to break the problem down into ideas, into concepts that you can actually act on. So how do they do that? All right, so to really get a grip on the E from a business angle, we need to do a kind of planet's health check. We're going to zoom in on two massive environmental pressures that are shaping, well, everything: climate change and the growing scarcity of our natural resources. When it comes to climate change, businesses tend to think in two different ways: mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation is all about preventing the problem from getting any worse. Think of it as stopping the cause. This is things like switching to renewable energy to slash your emissions. Adaptation, on the other hand, is about dealing with the effects we can no longer avoid. It's building seawalls, developing crops that could survive a drought. A really resilient business has to have a solid strategy for both. Now, climate change isn't the only pressure point, not by a long shot. For centuries, our whole economy has run on a pretty simple linear model. You take resources from the earth, you make something, and then you just throw it away. But here's the thing. As critical resources like water and certain minerals get scarcer and scarcer, that old model is just breaking down. It's just not sustainable. And the alternative? It's called the circular economy, and it's a totally new way of thinking. Instead of that use, make, dispose pipeline, the goal is to create a closed loop. So step one, you design products so waste and pollution are never even created. Step two, you find ways to keep materials in use for as long as humanly possible. We're talking repair, reuse, recycling. And step three, the big one, business activity should actually help regenerate natural systems. It's a radical idea, and it's becoming an incredibly profitable new business model. So we've got these massive environmental pressures. Now for the most important part: how do they actually translate into cold, hard financial risks for a business? This is where the E in ESG gets very real very, very quickly. Investors tend to sort climate risk into two main buckets. Physical risk. Well, that's the obvious one. It's the direct damage from actual climate events, the stuff you see on the news: a factory getting flooded, a supply chain cut off by a hurricane. Transition risk is a little sneakier, but it's just as powerful. This is the risk that comes from the entire world shifting away from carbon. Think about it. Will a new carbon tax make your business obsolete? Will customers start demanding greener products? Will a new technology just completely disrupt your entire industry? And if you think physical risk is some distant threat, I want you to look at the case of PG&E. This was a huge utility company in California, and it was forced into bankruptcy. Why? Because its own equipment was linked to starting these massive wildfires. Wildfires that were being made more frequent and way more intense by climate change. We're talking about financial liabilities in the tens of billions of dollars. That's not a small detail in a report. That is a catastrophic business failure, and it was driven by physical climate risk. Okay, so we get it. A company can be directly hit by a fire or a flood, but that's really just one piece of the puzzle. What investors are increasingly asking now is a much bigger question. What is this company's total impact on the climate, including everything it buys and everything it sells? This is where you start hearing about Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Now, I know it sounds technical, but it's actually pretty simple. Scope 1 is the pollution coming right out of your own facilities, literally the factory's smokestack. Scope 2 is the emissions from the electricity you buy to power that factory. And Scope 3, well, Scope 3 is everything else. It's the emissions from your entire value chain, from the raw materials you buy from suppliers, all the way to how your customers use your products. And Scope 3 is often the real monster under the bed. Let's take an oil and gas company. Its own operations, that's Scope 1 and 2, are just a tiny sliver of its total climate impact. The vast majority, we're talking over 90% sometimes, comes from Scope 3, from us, the customers, burning their products in our cars and homes. And that is exactly why investors are pushing companies so hard to take responsibility for their entire value chain, not just what happens inside their own four walls. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. How does an investor take all of this, mitigation, adaptation, physical risk, all three scopes, and actually use it to make smarter decisions? Let's try and look at this through their eyes. Here's the bottom line. The E is not about ethics anymore. It's about economics. Environmental factors, as we've seen, create real, financially material risks. The smart companies are getting ahead of this by both mitigating their impact and adapting to this new reality. They're innovating with these amazing circular models to deal with resource scarcity. And savvy investors, they're looking way beyond the factory gates, analyzing both physical and transition risks, and they're demanding total transparency on a company's full Scope 1, 2, and 3 footprint. So we've focused a lot on the massive risks that all these environmental factors create, right? But every risk has a flip side. The transition to a more sustainable world is going to require literally trillions of dollars of investment in new tech, new infrastructure, new business models. So the real question to leave you with is this. Where does all of this risk create the next great wave of opportunity? Thanks for tuning in.